Hi, it's Carrie from Classic Cottage Art and Antiques in Bowling Green, Virginia, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Creating a Classic Cottage. Today I'm going to get you started on wire crochet, just the basics. These are a few pictures of projects I've completed in the past, but today I'm just going to give you some tips on getting started. The video is a Facebook Live that I did several years ago, and pardon the orientation of it. There are some great tips in here, so just keep watching. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please consider doing so. Hit the subscribe button below. And if you have subscribed, thank you so much. So come on, let's get started. So I got to thinking, you may be familiar with wire, like with yarn and cording, like for baby blankets or afghans, but you may not realize that you can do crochet with wire and beads. So you need really the three basics that you need for wire crochet are wire, beads of course, and we're going to be using gemstone chip beads, and you're going to need a crochet hook. Now the fourth thing you'll need is a clasp. So let's talk about beads. You can use any kind of bead that you want as long as it isn't too heavy and that the hole isn't too large. Now this is a 6mm right here, fire polish bead. It's a really good size if you like a little bit larger. Right, I don't know if you can see it or not. Maybe not. Little bitty bead right here is a 4mm fire polish bead. So it's a faceted bead. You could use round beads, you could use square beads, you could use probably the tube type bugle beads as well. But we're going to be using chip beads. And as you can see, it's very organic looking, and I kind of like that because you don't have to be perfect to get it to have a really cool look. It's just a really neat look, and it's a good. I like this width for me. Some people like the larger. I kind of like the thinner myself. There's really no rhyme or reason on how to do this. There's just a little bit of a technique, but you can design it any way you want. As a matter of fact, I usually design on the go. I kind of, as I'm going along, I'm like, oh yeah, that bead looks kind of cool there, or, you know, nah, I don't think I want one there, or oh, I want space here. You know, like on this one, I put a whole bunch of space in there, and it looks kind of lacy. It's a little bit of a stretch to it, because you can move it around. I've got this one I'm wearing here, which is actually 2 strands that are connected at the clasp, 2 different size beads, and sometimes I'll actually twist them together. I've actually seen people take the shorter ones, or the single ones like this, and braid them together, and that's a really cool look. So those are lots of different options. Also, I was thinking this morning, for people who have allergies to metals and they really like this look, you could actually sew this length onto a leather cuff. I didn't have any to bring with me this morning, but you could sew this onto a leather cuff with actually thread and use it, which I actually might try that sometime. That sounds like a really cool option to make a bracelet. You're going to need beads, and we're going to use gemstone chip beads, and you know, they're random, and the holes are not exactly in the center all of the time. I don't know if you can see that, probably not, but that's what gives them the kind of a random look. If you're going to be using chip beads at home, what I would recommend, these are the small size chip beads. You can get nuggets too that are a little bit bigger. I'm looking to see if I can find a sample here of what I'm trying to tell you about. Sometimes the chip beads have actually, they're almost like slivers. Here's one. I mean, it's so like almost paper thin. I don't know if you can see that or not, probably not, but it's almost like paper thin, and the holes sometimes are super close to the edge, and you know, they're not the same thickness all the way through, so you just kind of have to be careful. Here's another very thin one. Oops, can you see that? I mean, it's probably so thin you can't see it. And what'll happen is the wire, especially on softer gemstones, the wire will, you know, work its way through because it's wire, and it'll end up cutting it through, and then you'll lose a bead, in which case I would just throw that one out and not even use it. So there's a little bit of waste in some of these gemstone strands, but for the most part they're really cool to work with. The next thing you're going to need is wire. Let me go back to beads for 1 second. I wouldn't use a really heavy bead. Like this is a very lightweight glass bead here, but if you get into a heavier bead, a heavier gemstone bead, it's going to like pull your wire down and it's going to become hard to work with. Also, you don't really want to use a bead that's got like a really big hole in it, because again, that could work the wire and break it. If it moves back and forth on the wire, it'll break it. Now, talking about wire, we're going to be using 28 gauge wire. And if you've never worked with wire before, wire comes in gauges. And I like to say that that just means thickness. So 28 gauge is a very thin wire, whereas you might see 20 gauge, 12 gauge, 18 gauge, 14 gauge. Those are thicker wires. Now, I like to use the 28 gauge because it is thin, and let me see if I can show you. It's super thin and it's super bendable. This is a copper core wire, so it's very malleable, very bendable, but it's also super thin, and it'll go through the tiny holes in some of the beads. Some of these chip beads have really teeny weeny tiny holes, so this will go through it great. So another reason I like to use this is because it acts a little more like cord than some of the thicker wires. You can use up to, I think I've crocheted with up to 24 gauge, but then it becomes very difficult to work with. The reason being is every time that you bend a wire, it's going to get harder. As this one's actually, I can even tell now that it has been bent quite a few times, so it doesn't, I know you can't tell just by looking at it, but I can tell by the feel of it. This one is a little bit stiffer than this one is because it's been bent more times. So if you've ever broken a twisty tie because you twisted it too many times, that's what's happened. It's a whole science thing with molecules and all that. I just like to say it's hard. It's called work hardening. Work hardening. So every time you bend a wire, it's going to harden a little bit. It changes the molecular structure so that it gets harder. I guess it pushes the molecules together. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I make jewelry. Anyway, so that's what happens. It gets harder. So you want to pick a wire that's going to take a little bit longer to get harder, which is a thinner wire, but also a copper wire will take a little bit longer to get to a hardened state of breaking. So the other thing you're going to need will be a crochet hook. I like to use size F, which is also a size 5, and you can't really see it on there. Size F or a size 5. And can you see? It's kind of a really good size for this. I don't want anything too small that I can't get it around the wire. And I don't want anything too big where it's going to make me have to work a little harder to get through the loops again. I also like to use a metal crochet hook. You can probably get away with a plastic one, but because this is wire, I just feel like I want to use something metal that the wire won't cut through over time, you know, if I do it a lot. And then the other thing you're going to need are clasp and jump rings. So what you're going to need to do to start your project will be to load all of your beads on your wire. Now, I like to work from the spool because I never know how much I'm exactly going to need. I like to design on the fly, so I could make a 3-row cuff or a 1-row chain. It depends on what happens to strike me at the moment. So I load all of my beads on the wire to begin with. So it doesn't have to be in any particular order. It could be random, because when you crochet, and especially if you go back to a second row, you're going to get a different look. It's awesome. But let me just kind of show you real quick. I like to pull them all down. And again, this is hardening the wire too, so I don't want to do it too many times. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of straighten this out with my fingers. And I'm going to make a loop. Not too big. About like so. And then I'm going to give it like 1 or 2 twists to kind of hold it in place. I'm going to put the hook of the wire, and remember, I'm going to leave myself a tail to hold on to. And I'm actually just going to make 1 twist so I can pull it down. I don't want this loop to be gigantic. So now I have my wire on my hook. This is where my tail comes in handy. So I'm going to hold on to my tail at some point. Oops, down here, maybe. I'm trying to do this so you can see it and I can see it too. So I tend to use this for some tension, my forefinger here. People do it different ways if you're crocheting with yarn. This is just the way I do it. But see, I have something to hold on to here. So basically all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this hook and I'm going to wrap it around once, catch it with the hook, and pull it through this loop I already have made. And I'm going to pull it down a little bit. I don't want to pull it too tight because if I go back to make a second pass on another row, I'm going to want to have some space where I don't have to really, you know, try to force the hook down in there. Okay, I'm going to make, I like to start with loops rather than just jump right into beads. So I'm going to make another loop. So again, I'm going to wrap it around, catch it with the hook, and pull it through. And I'm trying to make these loops somewhat uniform in size, but it doesn't have to be. But now the more loops I have, the more I have to hold on to for the next one. So I'm going to make one more, wrap it around, catch it with the hook, and pull it through. So I think I want to add a bead now. So I'm going to scoot the bead up right next to the last loop that I made. So if you, let me go back for a second. So now I have 3 loops in the chain and 1 on my hook. Okay, so I'm going to scoot my bead up next to the last one on the chain, and I'm going to just act like it isn't there. I'm going to wrap the wire around the hook, catch it with the hook, and pull it through. Now this one I may tighten down just a little bit more. And so now you can see I've captured the bead within that loop. Now I just personally, I like to pull this down out the way. I like to make 3 loops in between. It gives me some, if I'm going to braid it, it gets a little more interesting. If I'm going to add another row, then I have somewhere to go. I can see where you're at here. Again, I'm going to wrap it, catch it with the hook, pull it through, and try to keep my loops fairly consistent. That's one, and I'm going to do it one more time. And see, that one got a little bit big on me. One thing you do want to do is you want to make sure that you don't take it out too many times. If you make a mistake, I would cut it off and start over. Because like I said, the more you bend it, if you get a kink in it and you keep bending that kink, it could break. And it would make a weak spot in your bracelet. And I'm going to make the 3rd loop, pull it through. Come on, little guy. Oh, you have to talk to your beads too, by the way. I just always talk to my beads. Not that they listen, but it makes me feel better. Scoot up another bead, right up next to the loop. Pretend it's not even there. Grab the wire. And now I've captured it. And I would continue on this chain however long I wanted it to be. If I were going to braid it, I would make it quite a bit longer than I need, because as you know, when you braid, one side gets shorter than the other. You don't want it to come out too short. So that's all there is to that. And one thing I will tell you, if you're going to cut this wire, I would use a soft wire cutter, although in a pinch, you can use really old messed up scissors. See, mine are so messed up it's not even funny. But this wire is so thin, you can cut it with scissors, but I wouldn't do it a lot. And do not use your good sewing scissors for this, or your good paper scissors, because you will ruin your scissors on this. But basically, that's pretty much all there is to it, and it's fun. It works up relatively quickly, and you know, by the end of the day, you could have like 3 or 4 bracelets. Think about, oh wow, Christmas. You could have these made up, you know, for Christmas presents way ahead in advance. So, hope this helped you understand what wire crochet is all about. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.